I just think we're living in a day and age right now where people need hope. People need to know the grace of God. People wonder over and over again, what's the message of Jesus? It's really simple. Jesus Christ, he did not come for the healthy. He came for the sick. He did not come to condemn the world. He came to save the world.
We all have those moments where we need a little encouragement to get through our day. Someone to remind us that we are not alone. Find peace. Embrace joy. Seek God daily. Welcome to Jesus Calling Stories of Faith. Our guest this week is Rich Wilkerson Jr. Rich is the pastor at VOUS Church in Miami, Florida, and descends from 4 generations of pastors on both sides of his family, including David Wilkerson, the writer of the classic Christian book, The Cross and the Switchblade. Today, Rich tells us how he forged his own way in ministry and opens up about the painful struggle he and his wife endured in their young marriage that lasted nearly a decade.
My name is Rich Wilkerson Jr., and I lead VOUS Church in Miami, Florida with my wife, Dawn Cherie, and it's really in the heart of Miami. VOUS is just short for rendezvous. People always ask us, what does VOUS mean? Is that even a real church name? Rendezvous means the meeting place, but we quickly discovered that people had a hard time spelling the word and Googling the word. Nobody liked the websites that came up, so we just go by VOUS Church. And it's been just an amazing 3 years, getting to see people's lives change and transformed by the message of Jesus. I grew up in Tacoma, Washington. I was born to pastors for parents. In fact, my dad was an evangelist, but I'm 4 generations pastor on both sides of my family. And in 1998, growing up in Tacoma, Washington, in my grandfather's church, my dad felt really led to come and move to Miami, where he took over a small urban inner city church. And so it was a huge journey for my brothers and I as we moved. I was 14 years of age, entering into high school, moving from Tacoma all the way to Miami. I think looking back now, it's always easier to connect the dots looking back than it is when you're looking forward, that my dad got a word from the Lord and he stepped out in faith. And now today, I'm reaping the benefits of his faithful decision. You know, I'm really grateful for the family that I grew up in. Sometimes when you're 14 years of age, you have a hard time seeing the good or seeing the beauty in it. But now at 34 years of age, I look back and I'm so thankful for the way that I was raised. I was raised with convictions, and I was raised with faithful people all around me that took a risk, that stepped out. I learned quickly that being a follower of Jesus doesn't mean that you're living your life for convenience, but rather you're living your life for conviction. And so now at 34, I'm just thankful for the heritage. And I know that so many things that are happening in my life is because I get to stand on the shoulders really of giants in the faith that have gone before me. My uncle, David Wilkerson, really he's my second cousin. My dad and him are first cousins, but he's always been a hero to me. I remember as a young age watching the movie The Cross and the Switchblade as Pat Boone portrayed and was the character of David Wilkerson. And as a young kid, I had this hero in my life of going, wow, that's what it looks like to step out full of faith, not to live in fear, not to back down to risk or to even areas that you might be afraid in, as he stepped up to the gang members and as he stepped up in a time in New York City that was known for drug and known for prostitution and known for really a dangerous time. He stood full of faith. And I think for me, the way it played a part in my life is that from a young age, I was always very sensitive towards God. I knew I loved God, and I did know that God loved me. I just don't think I was always sure how I fit in. I didn't really see how I was gonna play my part. But at 17 years of age, I just had a God encounter. I was in Australia, Adelaide, Australia, and I can't remember who was preaching, but I was with my dad and we were at a conference. And it wasn't a big emotional moment. It was more like a conscious decision that I just felt the Holy Spirit speaking to me saying, how long are you gonna run from your calling? And I think stepping out, as I began to do that more and more, I think the Lord was just speaking to me that you can be you and you can be uniquely you. You don't have to do it just like those that went before you. And so quickly, I think what began to transition in my life is rather than feeling the shadow effect, rather than feeling the weight or the burden of those that have gone before me, instead, I think my heart turned to gratitude, that I was thankful for all the examples, for all the mentors, for all the voices of what it looked like to walk out the faith journey. And so while God's given me all these great references, I think because of the love of Jesus, I've discovered my identity in it. And I don't have to do it like my dad. I don't have to do it just like my grandfather. I don't have to do it just like my uncle David Wilkerson. I can do it uniquely the way that he's called me to do it. And for me, that's been so freeing that now I don't feel the burden of being like them, but rather I feel the gratitude for exactly who they are. So after Dawn Shree and I had been married for about 3 or 4 years, I remember Dawn Shree was her 25th birthday. We had started talking about the fact that we wanted to start a family. It just seemed like the natural thing to do. It was in our heart. We both come from big families. Dawn Shree's one of 7 kids. I'm one of 4 boys. So we've always wanted to have a family. But on her 25th birthday, she went to the doctor to discover that she had a condition known as PCOS, and it was going to make it very difficult for her to conceive. And so we began the journey of talking with doctors and going to specialists. And 8 years into the journey is really how long it took us. But somewhere on that journey, we decided that we wanted to go public with it. And it was really Dawn Shree that was led. I think that for her, being the woman, it was a little bit more of a challenging thing to talk about. But I think about 3 years into the journey of not being able to have kids, she felt like it was her opportunity to share from the valley, if you will.
It is a really private thing. You know, you're going to the doctor, you're having tests, you have this desire in your heart to start a family and there's nothing you can do about it. It's a really private pain. And when people start to ask questions, you know, when you get engaged, people ask you when you're gonna get married. When you get married, they ask you when you're gonna have kids. Yep. When you have one kid, they ask you when you're gonna have another kid. It's just casual conversation. It's harmless. But when you're in a place of pain, even those harmless questions can be shots to the heart.
I think so often in church, we're so good at talking about things after the miracle happens. I think we need some more people to be open when they're actually in the midst of pain. I learned so much about God in that season of hoping to have a child. Today, I stand on the other side of it where God did answer our request. After an 8-year struggle of trying to have kids, God is so gracious and so faithful that he gave us our firstborn son. His name is Wyatt Wesley Wilkerson. Wyatt means brave, so I call him my brave boy. But now when I look back, I wouldn't remove any of that struggle. That struggle is what makes the story so good. And many times, all of us, we only know of God on the mountaintop. But I know God in the valley, that he's not just the God of your triumph, but he's also the God of your trial. And many times we don't allow ourselves to be honest with God in our pain, in our worry, in our fear, to ever discover that he's actually right there with us. It's so easy to go around to certain scenes that are really full of heartache and heartbreak, devastation and poverty, and go, where is God? The answer is, he's right there. He doesn't leave us. He doesn't forsake us. I think when it comes to God, there's certain things that you can't learn on the mountaintop. You actually have to learn it in the valley. I think the greatest lesson that Dawn Shree and I learned is that a waiting season doesn't have to be a wasted season. That wherever you're at today, whatever you're going through, whatever you're facing, if you'll lean into relationship with Jesus, he'll speak to you. He'll reveal things to you about his character, about his nature. And sometimes we get into these moments where we go, I just want to throw it away. The pain is too bad. The heartache is too bad. But the Bible says in James that we're to consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when we face trials of many kinds. Why? It's because that trial is developing something in us, a newfound character, a perseverance that has to be strengthened. And the only way for it to be strengthened is through struggle. For Dawn Shree and I think it brought us closer together. It forced us to have real conversations. It forced us to actually talk about where we were at. I'm not acting like it was easy. There was lots of tears. There was days of doubt. there was worry, there was bad days. But we decided that we were going to grow closer to Jesus in it, and we were going to grow closer as a couple. That's what storms sort of do. Storms either have a way of pushing you away from God, or you can choose to allow your storm to push you towards God. I love that story in Matthew 14 where they're in the middle of a storm and Jesus walks out on the water. They think it's a ghost, but there's one guy in the boat, his name's Peter, and he thinks it's Jesus. And so he's like, if that's really you, Jesus, tell me to come to you. And Jesus just says one word. He says, come. Peter steps out of the boat, walks on water toward Jesus. That one word, come, is I think the message of the gospel, that whatever you're facing, whatever you're going through, maybe it's infertility, maybe it's a loss of a loved one, maybe it's the loss of a job, maybe it's a broken heart, maybe it's betrayal. I don't know what the fill in the blank is, but Jesus would say to all of us, just come. Come to me, all you who are weary, heavy burden, and I will give you rest. And unless I had gone through the 8 years of infertility, I could preach to you about rest, but now I can actually testify that I've been in a moment where I needed Jesus to show up. And he is faithful to his promise that if we'll come to him, he provides rest for us. I think the enemy wants to tempt us that when we're going through a tough time, just to discard it, to kind of hit the click button and just try to pass through it. But I'm telling you, there's something powerful about these seasons that if we'll lean into them, the breaking and the crushing, it produces something new in us. And I can honestly testify that we serve the God who walks through everything with us, that when we walk through the rivers, they will not pass over us. When we walk through the water, it will not sweep over us. When we walk through the fire, we will not be burned. He's the God who goes before, behind, and around.
We'll be right back with Rich and hear how he's trying to reach the world to remind them Jesus is a friend of misfits and sinners and outsiders. Right after this brief message about a way to connect with other readers of Jesus Calling to pray for our country and the world through the Jesus Calling weekly prayer call. Did you know that Sarah Young, the author of Jesus Calling, prays for her readers each day? In that spirit, we want to extend the Jesus Calling prayer community out to you in a more personal way. Each Tuesday morning, you can dial into the Jesus Calling weekly prayer call, where the team from Jesus Calling and special guests will minister to us during a 10-minute call to reflect on that day's passage from Jesus Calling, read scripture references, and pray together for each other and our world. Prayer call times are 8 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Central, 6 a.m. Mountain, and 5 a.m. Pacific, and are for U.S. only. For more information on the Jesus Calling weekly prayer call or to submit prayer requests, please visit jesuscalling.com/prayer-call.
You know, I grew up in a really amazing home with faithful parents, faithful grandparents that really did teach me the Bible and taught me about God. Yet I think at a young age, I started to view God oftentimes as somebody up in heaven who was maybe angry at me, or if I did something wrong, he was going to let me know that I was wrong. Maybe the picture that I had developed, not necessarily sure how that all the way happened, was kind of like God was like Santa, who's got a nice list and a naughty list. And I think it's really important the way that you view God, because ultimately the way that you view God is going to dictate how you receive and communicate with God. And it wasn't until I was much older that I began to really discover who Jesus was. And I think in discovering who Jesus was, it's fully shifted my paradigm of who God is, that God is a loving Father, that he's not behind the bush waiting and watching as you make a mistake to punish you, but rather he's there that when you do make a mistake, he wants to pick you back up. There's just something about him that has this pull. Everyone wanted to be around him. There's something about his life, the way that he spoke, the way that he talked, the way that he lived, that everybody, they were so intrigued and they felt so welcomed by him. So it shouldn't really be that much of a surprise that when a devotional is written that's coming from the voice of God, it's coming from the voice of Jesus, that people, whether or not they're in church or whether or not they actually affiliate themselves as being quote unquote a Christian, that they would resonate with it. Jesus Calling Devotional, September 5th. I am your best friend, as well as your king. Walk hand in hand with me through your life. Together we will face whatever each day brings. Pleasures, hardships, adventures, disappointments. Nothing is wasted when it's shared with me. I can bring beauty out of the ashes of lost dreams. I can glean joy out of sorrow, peace out of adversity. Only a friend who is also the King of Kings could accomplish this divine alchemy. There is no other like me. The friendship I offer you is practical and down to earth, yet it is saturated with heavenly glory. Living in my presence means living in two realms simultaneously, the visible world and unseen, eternal reality. I have equipped you to stay conscious of me while walking along dusty, earthbound paths. And so I, for one, am really thankful for the resource that it is, because not only has it ministered to me personally, but it's also been such a resource that I've been able to give to others that are new on the journey, or maybe even outside of our church. And I see it as a weapon that as people start to read it, they start to get to know the heart of God, but they also begin to discover their identity of who God's called them to be. And I'm just thankful for all that Jesus Calling is doing and for what it means to so many people. So my new book is called Friend of Sinners, Why Jesus Cares More About Relationship Than Perfection. And when I started writing this book, I was thinking about all of my friends who sort of have this misconception of God, that they think that God is not for them, or they think that God is irrelevant, or they think God is mad at them. Jesus had a lot of nicknames. Nicknames, we kind of get them based upon other people's perception typically. It's interesting to me that when they nicknamed Jesus, they nicknamed him the friend of sinners, that he was obviously doing life with people, that those that are quote unquote religious or perfect or godlike, they thought that those people did not belong around him. Yet I love that nickname because that nickname is so welcoming to me, that I belong with Jesus, that Jesus says, hey, you belong before you believe. Jesus was the guy who was actually at dinner with people. He sat in long conversations. He was not looking at the outside. He was trying to get to the inside. So God never loved me or chose me because I was good enough or because I was righteous enough. He simply loved me because he is love. And over again, even at 34 years of age, I have to remind myself of that. And I wrote Friend of Sinners because I want people to hear the truth, that the gospel is good news, that God is not mad at you. He's madly in love with you. And when I think about Jesus Calling, I mean, this is what this devotion is all about. It's about conveying over and over again the grace of God, that God is for us. And if God is for us, who can be against us? Jesus Christ, he is the friend of sinners. He didn't come for perfect people. He came for a relationship with all people.
You can find Rich's book, Friend of Sinners, wherever books are sold. Next time on Jesus Calling Stories of Faith, we talk with Grammy Award-winning singer-songwriter Zach Williams. Zach shares the story of his idyllic childhood and how it was shaped by the support of family, friends, and church, and how he nearly walked away from that world after becoming a full-time musician and descending into a dark season of addiction.
Nothing I was doing was filling this hole in my life, and a year or two went by, and me and my wife continued to just struggle with, our marriage and the things that I was doing, and it got to a point where she was pregnant with our daughter, and I remember I was getting ready to leave to go to Europe for the second time for a month, and she had kind of come to me and just kind of given me an ultimatum, and basically was like, if your drug use, if your alcohol use, if the lifestyle continues, I don't think that I can continue to be your wife.
Thank you for watching Jesus Calling Stories of Faith. To learn more about how to keep up with our shows bi-monthly and to listen to our weekly podcast, please visit youtube.com/JesusCallingBook to view and hear previous episodes, and to watch a short informational video about how to access all things Jesus Calling on audio and video formats. Plus, learn how to subscribe to our podcast and video channels. Your subscription helps get the word out to more people who will benefit from these inspirational stories of faith.